It's here today. Give a presentation. Just one quick DEI announcement. If you're a sophomore, we are having the sophomore brunch on Saturday the 3rd from 11 to 12, so mark your calendars.
By racing on a box barge at the surface of the ocean. I need that for that's from my 270 lecture. So I hope you're not here for 270, so you're in the wrong place this time around. I am Professor Page. Still respond to Commander Page or Sir, right? Just out of habit. Not too many people call me Reverend Page, but behind that one too for another day. Before we get too far, does anybody know why the ship didn't pull into port with the rest of its squadron? Ship didn't pull into port with, like, the squadron was pulling in, one ship stayed at sea. Why didn't the ship pull in the rest of the squadron? Because it, just like the rest of you, it would not give in to peer pressure. Yeah, genuinely happy Friday. That's how I like to start. Trying to keep things informal here. I have some stuff. Some of it even does say diversity. I can talk about diversity. So I have some slides that can guide a conversation that's sort of all about me and gives me some stuff to say to all of you. Is anyone who has taken any of my classes yet though, like, if you ask questions, probably diving down rabbit holes or asking about things is even more interesting than anything I might put on a slide anyway. But so, barring that, like, if no one comes up with anything, I'll talk about my career and journey. I'll talk a bit about Navy, which I could go on for 2 hours. So if you all don't stop me with questions or comments or anything else while I'm in the Navy part, like, we're gonna get stuck there. So please feel free to pull me out of that rabbit hole. If we get to it, why Michigan for me versus any of the other options I had after 21 years, and talk diversity, expectations, research philosophy. They're just some things I could put on about a dozen slides. So with that, before even maybe I won't go that direction just yet. But first, I thought it might be nice for everyone here to know how my journey did not start. I assure you that is official letterhead. I don't know if y'all's look similar. Focus your attention right around here. So, I don't know if it could be read all the way in the back, but I redacted my address because my parents still live there, so I don't need y'all knowing where my parents still live. But it's in Canton, right? It's about 20 minutes away from here, so that starts to get after why Michigan for me. But there was a letter prior to this. I think I still have it somewhere as well, where they put me on the wait list. I applied here for undergrad, College of Engineering. They put me on the wait list. And, so I couldn't, wasn't in, but I'd be on the wait list. But there are these openings in what was the college they offered? I forget what it was. It was like the Indiana Jones College, right? It was like archaeology. They're right, like Nah, not exactly, right? I take all those tests in high school, and I liked science and math and all that stuff. It seemed right for me. That didn't turn out that way. So I had this one. This was the one of all of them that my parents hung on to for some reason, but I had something similar from Purdue, something similar from Michigan State, something similar from Notre Dame, something similar from MIT. Out of the 7 colleges I applied to, I only got accepted to one of them. So my college decision was pretty easy. The Naval Academy. Of all the colleges to get accepted to, the Naval Academy was the one that accepted me. And even that was a bit of a fight for medical reasons. But if nothing else, part of the story and journey for me is one of resilience, because I was about 2 weeks away from high school graduation and still didn't have any letters that said anything other than this. And I walked into, I did get invited to, I'll assume they still do it, that it's sometime before graduation, they invite in all the seniors and they have sort of like a ceremony for, here's someone who got a scholarship for this or that, right? It's sort of like an awards ceremony at the end of high school. So I did get invited to that. Thinking to myself, oh great, I'll go receive a scholarship that I can't spend anywhere because I'm not actually going to college as of yet. And it turns out there was an officer there that was accepting folks into the academies, and so I found out in front of everyone, thinking that one of my friends was going to be getting into the academy. But that was the big news for me that night. So about 2 weeks before graduation, I found out I finally got accepted somewhere, and it was the Naval Academy. Yeah. So my decision was fairly easy. One and only one place to go, which led off on this journey. So instead of coming here and probably going into mechanical engineering and then probably going and working at Ford, because my dad worked at Ford for 30 years right there. He was an engineer at Ford right there in Dearborn for 30 years before he retired in 2007. So that probably would have been life's journey for me. I would have come here, gone in mechanical, ended up in the auto industry. Right, wrong, and different, but that's probably how life would have gone. Instead it looked like this, which this is just a tool that we use in the Navy as engineering duty officers in the Navy to kind of lay out our career. So we use it for mentoring a lot. So anytime I'd go see someone senior in rank to me and talk about my career, we would pull this up because you get very used to reading these things and they can see sort of which tours you've done and think about maybe which tours they want to get you into. So this is the final version of it, and I probably have 25 or so other versions of this, which is maybe one of the first sort of like messages to hang on for you all. I can show you the final version on how things went. 21-year career, and it's no exaggeration that I probably had 25 versions of these, right? There was 25 different versions of what I thought I was gonna do when I grew up in the Navy, right? When I was some captain or some admiral. It changed along the way as more information came in, or as I discovered that I enjoyed this more than that, or I wanted to do acquisition instead of repair, and I wanted it to be on ships instead of missiles, things like that, right? So if you don't have this figured out right now, like the end state of your career, don't worry, it changed for me 25 times. Like it changes 25 times for you as well as you discover what you like more and find that boss you want to work for, or that new industry or company, whatever it may be, right? So don't worry about not having the end state figured out. As I would mentor folks younger than me and they'd bring me these things, usually what I'd start in with is it's 100% accurate in this direction. Red line represents like time right now, right? Whenever I printed this, it was this, right? So on this side of the line, 100% accurate. And on this side of the line, close to 0% accurate, because it's probably never gonna work out that way. In this case it did, but only because when I printed this, I was already had in my retirement papers, so that was one exception to my usual rule. But so this summarizes a 21-year career for me at the time. Right, I was Future Ships Requirements Officer, so the last job I had in the Navy. I don't know, do we want to work forward or backwards through this thing? We'll end up there. So I went to the Naval Academy upon graduation and commission from the Naval Academy, which was actually like the next point of resilience, right? If we'll talk about resilience in a career and responding to how being resilient to some of the wrinkles life brings. It almost didn't get my commission from the academy either. You're in junior year. You go into pre-commissioning physicals because they want to make sure that you're physically fit to be an officer in the Navy. And part of that, they're like, have you ever had a seizure? To which the answer was yes. Were you ever unconscious? To which the answer was yes. So quick rabbit hole from high school. I was a soccer player, track runner, growing up at Canton High School. during one fateful night my senior year playing soccer, indoor soccer, so it was like in January. They have these full-size indoor fields up in Wixom. We're there, and there was this team from Canada that had come down to play on this full-size indoor field. And we were crushing them like 7-0 at halftime, right? So they had driven like 2 or 3 hours on like a Thursday night, just getting crushed at halftime. So like tensions rising. Punchline of the story turns into after the fight broke out. I was just I started, I swear. After the fight broke out, last thing I remember is a pair of shoelaces right there. Turns out this kid had a black belt and kicked me right on the bridge of my nose. So yeah, I passed out, had a seizure. I was unconscious for over 20 minutes, which like, I didn't care, I didn't know. But evidently that's a problem because after like 5 minutes, you can be declared dead in some instances. One of the fathers on the team was a nurse, so, and he was all of like 6'6", 280 pounds, like the dude was a linebacker. So when he saw what happened and he saw the seizure, like he came running out and everybody was like, nope, he's doing whatever he wants to do. Like held my tongue, but I didn't swallow it, and did all the first aid stuff he should. Until the first responders got there, which was like the next memory after the shoelaces, right? So when I said, right, I remember fight, I remember shoelaces, and then like my throat feels kind of tight, so I just start swinging at everybody in front of me. But it turned out it had been like 20 or 30 minutes later, and those were the paramedics. So I was like hitting the paramedics because I thought that they were choking me. It turns out it was a neck brace, right? Because I had little cranium damage. So there's that whole scenario, and so the docs in the Navy in their infinite wisdom were, because I've been unconscious for so long and had a seizure and all that, they wanted to make sure it wouldn't happen again. And evidently they thought I might have a learning disorder. So I tried to wiggle my way out of it. Like, I'm a junior at the Naval Academy, systems engineering, 3-point blah, GPA, like, I have a learning disorder, just let me keep it. Like, we're doing okay. It's working for me. The lieutenant didn't find that funny, as all of you did, which I appreciate. Yeah, they sent me in for tests and found out I did not in fact have a learning disorder and all these other things, but so I finally got my commission. But like the resilience, like, oh, first I might not get into college, then I might not get my commission. Like, what the hell? Ian, what
happened to the guy who
Yeah, so by the time I had gotten to the emergency room and they took their x-rays and their MRIs and everything else, and so by the time I was talking with police, because I would have had to be the one to like press charges, well, they had released the team, they were back in Canada, which means it would have been a State Department issue because it is like an international incident at that point if they aren't still held locally. And so yeah, I mean you could say the guy got away scot-free or whatever, but so like nothing. So I just I have this little thing against Canadians and especially French Canadians as a result. Wonderful people, except for that one guy. I don't know. Great question though. It's an example of pull me out of the rabbit holes. It all worked out, got my commission, SWAS stands for Surface Warfare Officer School. So I from the academy, I was a system engineer, decided to drive ships and sail ships, but I had this thing called an engineering duty officer option, right? Which we'll get to soon enough. But so first had to learn how to sail ships, since that's what Surface Warfare Officer School is, up in Newport, Rhode Island. The only reason I like keeping that one on there, even though it was this short 6-month little school, is that a class ahead of me was this gal named Kimberly Seed, and she was sent to the immediate graduate education program at NPS, which means that when she went to learn and drive ships, she joined my class a year later after getting a graduate degree. She sat right in front of me for like the 6 different classes, all the way through, because she was a communication officer on a DDG, right? So we had all of our classes together. After a few weeks, we started carpooling. After a few months, we started dating. And after about a year, we got married. move fast, but that's also another story for another day. But so the only reason SWAS is on there is where I met my wife Kim. She was the Kamo on the John S. McCain out of Yokosuka, Japan. I was Kamo on USS Steedham out of San Diego, California. So yeah, the first year of our marriage was spent with the Pacific Ocean between us. Is the short version of that. But yeah, went to the USS Steedham, DEG 63, Communications Officer, Information Systems Officer, Electronic Key Management System Officer, so EKMS, like that's all the top secret information comes into the ship to launch a missile here at these coordinates, like that's the system that takes care of encryption, decryption. Easiest way to lose a job in the Navy, do something wrong with the EKMS system, because that, more than anything else, is what we don't want our adversaries getting a hold of, right? It's World War II and I forget why I'm forgetting the name of the box, right?
Enigma?
Enigma, yeah, right? Like that's the Enigma machine, right? They get their hands on that. So yeah, easiest way to lose a job. So at this point in time, as I was leaving the ship, I set a calendar reminder for 2 years later. That's the last moment in time they could hold me responsible for anything in that particular account. Nothing went wrong, so I got always got right, because the person after you could mess up and they could bring that breadcrumb trail back to you for some reason, or at least pull you in and make you sweat. But so at any rate, sailed on a ship. That's the really long-winded version of sailing on a ship. After that, I exercised that option to become an engineering duty officer. So EDOs in the Navy, or acquisition professionals, were engineers in the Navy, the nerds in the Navy. So we acquire, design, build, deliver, repair ships, missiles, submarines. We have we take on the national imperative, national mission of diving, right? So diving and salvage in the engineering duty community. But initially, I went to Southwest Regional Maintenance Center, is what RMC stands for, right? So I did maintenance first, repaired destroyers, LSDs, dock landing ships, LPDs, all sorts there. Kind of got my feet wet as an engineer and project manager, project officer, etc. Also did business officer and other type things, and that just starts the theme of I was like a junior lieutenant in the business officer piece, the front office, sort of port-wide loading and port-wide repair type issues. I had relieved a lieutenant commander, right, as a junior lieutenant. So a lot of these jobs, just the way things turned out, I was punching above my weight, and it all started there at Southwest RMC. But while I was there, Kim also moved back from Japan. She got out of the Navy, and so one cool thing with the engineering duty community is they require you to get a technical master's, a master's degree in a technical field. So a lot of folks go to Naval Postgraduate School, but there's this little program at MIT, about 10 officers per year go there to learn naval construction and engineering. So I was fortunate enough that they didn't look at the paperwork regarding any potential learning disorder or something like that. And I got into that program, 3-year program, 3-year payback. Well, that sort of started, that was a real start of the journey here, right? So I spent 3 years there, got 2 degrees, because the Navy requires you to get what's called an Naval Engineer's degree. So it's like the engineer's degree. It's a bit more than a master's degree, but less than a PhD. So the Navy requires us to get that, but take enough classes that you can get more than 1 degree. So I also got a Master's of Science in Engineering Management. So it was like a joint program between the College of Engineering and the Sloan School of Business. So pulled in a lot of those business aspects. Got essentially two master's degrees while I was there in those 3 years. From there, went down to Washington, D.C. PEO ships, DDG 1000 ship design officer, right? So I started off, and that ship was in pieces and parts, north and south, BIW and Ingalls. By the time I left that tour, she floated, right? So she did what we wanted her to do. We lowered her into the water. She didn't turn over. She was perfectly stable. And we started activating systems appropriately. But I got pulled early from that to head down to San Diego. Yeah.
So is that where you met Professor McCoy?
Where did I first? So I did technically first meet him at MIT, right? Because fast forwarding a little bit, when I went back to MIT to be on the faculty, that position that I held was the same position that Professor McCoy had held at MIT earlier than that, and they were already pulling him back in to give some of the sort of here's how we design integrated electric type lectures, because they were, well, they still invite him back up to do that, right, is the short version of that story. So that's when I first interacted with him, but yeah, then certainly here, because that is right around, at least in this little window of time, is when he was running the electric ships office. So we were sort of the big fish for him to make sure that the all-electric plant was delivered and running appropriately. Yeah, good question. When I left that tour, went to San Diego. Thought I'd stick around in Washington DC, go to another program office, maybe amphibs or something else, but instead they had another one where I showed up as a lieutenant and relieved commander, so punching above my weight once again, but running all the technical aspects. So it was a sort of a week in Bath, Maine, a week in DC, a week in Bath, Maine, a week in DC, just rotating like through that yard for like 3 years straight, because I'm trying to build a ship, and in first of class, right, that's when you're working on all the bugs from design, where two things may try to occupy the same physical space, for instance, right? And you just have to go figure out which one of the, generally if it was structure gets to stay where structure's supposed to be and the pipe has to move or something like that, right? But it's a incredible value to seeing it and touching it as you're making those decisions instead of making them from 500 miles away. So just another, maybe that's another point to hang on, right, in this industry and for all of you, right? Incredible value to being sort of like at the shipyard, or getting down to the shipyard. Oftentimes the engineering outfit, whether it's NASCO that has it up in Mission Valley instead of at the yard, or BIW that has it a few miles out instead of there in the yard, or certainly the engineers for the Navy are in Washington DC, and we build precisely 0 ships in Washington DC. So regardless of which outfit, which company, which anything you may go work for, if they don't have their engineers in the yard, like, solve that yourself, right? Go to the yard, find the reasons to go touch the product that you are designing and learn things about it, right? I learned more about welding from the guy who was trying to weld, I'll say, really thick steel at 11 at night, 2300 for you military types. I learned more about welding from him just chatting with him than anything out of a textbook or something you may get here. So I'll hang on that point for that there. But so from there went to they liked my performance enough and were familiar enough with me in the shipyard, since I spent essentially half of that tour in a shipyard anyway, that they sent me essentially to NASCO's Soup Ship Bath Detachment San Diego to be the government oversight for all the ships that NASCO was delivering to the Navy. So that's pretty cool for a few reasons. Once again, in this job as the officer in charge and the program manager's representative, so rare billet where you do very literally wear 2 hats, because you're representing the program manager that's responsible for cost, schedule, performance, and works directly for the Secretary of the Navy for ASNRDA anyway, and you're responsible to soup ship to the government oversight. So it's interesting. It is the only one of 2 billets. There's one on the combat systems side where you do wear 2 hats at the same time. But coupled with that is that my boss was 3,000 miles away, about as far as you can get within the continental United States, because I was in San Diego and he was in Bath, Maine. We don't have any construct where there's someone in like Seattle or Puget Sound that's like being controlled by someone from like Jacksonville, Florida, but that'd be like the only like marginally close case. But yeah, my boss was 3,000 miles away, and I was a junior person because I had relieved a commander who had relieved a commander who had relieved a captain who had relieved a commander, and here I was the lieutenant commander, and everybody knew that, right? Like the rank is very obvious. Like we physically wear it, and they're like, oh, those are gold oak leaves, not silver oak leaves. You're just a lieutenant commander, which I made them regret. Because I mean, technical is when a drainage system doesn't work, a drainage system doesn't work, and my rank doesn't matter at all. I will hold you accountable, right? And so you learn that the hard way. No, it was fine. I enjoyed that tour immensely. The cool thing there, the last cool vignette from that particular tour, right, is when you deliver a ship. The cool thing was I got to deliver first of a class vessel. So at the time USNS Lewis B. Puller, now USS Lewis B. Puller, first of a class, right? First time we had done that particular vessel, so there's a lot of extra tests you have to go through, but was there all the way through delivery. When the Navy delivers a ship or accepts delivery of a ship, we do, at least ceremonially, write the company a check, right? So there was a check that went to NASCO, physical check for $600 million. Well, someone has to sign the check. Well, the CNO didn't sign the check, and PEO ships didn't sign the check. Lieutenant Commander Page got to sign on behalf of the CNO. So there's a check somewhere back at home for $600 million that I got to sign, right? Not my money. Well, maybe not all your money because maybe you haven't paid taxes yet. But right, your parents were taxpayers. I was spending their money on their behalf wisely. I assure you, to the best of our ability. But yeah, it's cool. You get to do things like write checks for $600 million ceremonially. It wasn't one of the big like lottery checks either though. Like it's like 8.5 by 11 check. It isn't one of the big like poster board things. But yeah, like I wasn't even a year into that tour before they called me all the way back to DC so that newly minted 1-star Admiral James Downey, who had been Captain James Downey, the guy who I'd worked for there, he had just put on his first star, and he wasn't a year into that job, and he was saying, now we got this opportunity for you, which was really code word for we don't know anybody else who can do it. And so the program, did this all of a sudden get dim, or is that just me?
Chris just walked away.
Oh, all right.
It's because Chris walked away.
Oh, yeah, here we go. Let's just unplug that thing too. We don't want a mouse getting in the way. Told me less than halfway through this tour to say, we need you to go to MIT, right? So the program up there is called Naval Construction and Engineering. I left that program and done some naval engineering and then done some naval construction. And so they saw no one better fit to send back than me. So I had the unique opportunity to head back there, which is where then things also got backwards, because normally for any of you, you'll go through some PhD program and then postdoc and then maybe become a professor kind of thing. So I did the professor thing first, and then at the end of being a professor, it turned into, hey, can I get a PhD? And no one said no, to my surprise, right? Like honestly, that was the expectation, right? You're at MIT, and they know that I'm not staying at MIT. They know that I'm going somewhere else, but all the way up to the dean and provost, they're like, yeah, sure, let's do this. And after that final yes, then you get home and it's like, oh shit, they all said yes. Like I actually have to do this now. I actually have to go fill out an application. Which gets into sort of like the next bit of resilience, right? Because so I awesome tour, went to NAVC 05, and in a few slides, I'll make some sense out of NAVC 05, because that's kind of like the Navy part is like you hear this, Warfare Center and NAVC and all the like acronym soup, so I'm gonna try to provide some organization to that. But so we'll get to NAVC 05, I promise. But they're the engineers within NAVC, and I got to go work for a guy named Chris Higgins, who's an alum of this program, circa Professor Singer time frame. So they had some overlap here. But Chris was the ship design manager for DDGX. I got to be his deputy. And so why that was really cool is after teaching all of this stuff and pulling things like set-based design and flexibility and real options and other things into the curriculum there, it was a little bit of put your money where your mouth is and prove that this can actually be done on a Navy ship, because one of the things with set-based design you'll discover is there's a decent amount of literature out there in academia. None of it really says, right, it's all theoretic. Most of it theoretic. We we set up that program, we set up the ship design team and everything else, and that was the beauty and why I could even consider PhD afterwards, is that that was the sort of dissertation was related to standing up this real sort of set-based design process. And so now that dissertation is out there in the open. But for those 2 years, it was, by day, run a design team, run a process, run that program through the ringers, head over to the Pentagon, defend it, tell them what we're doing, set it all up, learn as we go along, get home, cook dinner, get the kids to bed, work on your dissertation at night, right? So I was like a part-time PhD candidate at MIT, somewhat scary. And then you also notice in this time frame, right, towards the end, so this was 2018, and so towards the end of this was 2020, right? And so we all know what happened in 2020 to all of us, to the entire world, right? So at a dimension and a degree in that of and do it remotely while trying to teach your kids by day and run an over 100-person design team by day and work on your PhD at night and pull in all of the sort of like COVID aspects in the middle of that as well, which on just a like slight personal note, right? Crazy time in the middle of a global pandemic to find out your kid has an autoimmune disease, right? So dealing with the hospitalizations and the week-long stays and things like that as he was responding, and not giving up, right? Like that was the gist of it, right? The resilience, right? That's the resilient piece there is sort of, as best I can tell during that time frame, sort of went up and like touched my limits. Like I felt them, like felt about to break. Like there they were, right? There's a lot going on, but didn't and maintained, and the short version is here I am. But amongst all that, also got moved jobs. So they sent me over to OpNav N96, which I don't have an org chart for that one, but CNO staff, N9 are warfighting requirements, N96 are surface warfare writing requirements, N96 F3, blah, 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 future ships requirements officer. So they sent me over there to write, validate, analyze all the requirements for all the future ships. So that included the DDGX, large unmanned surface vessels, medium unmanned surface vessels, the autonomy going into them, workforce development issues, but anything that we're gonna build that we aren't building right now, that's what fell in my portfolio there. And then a lot of side jobs as well, but stayed there actually a full 3 years because the only other time I essentially got, I won't even call it a rejection, but for lack of a better term, let's call it a rejection. I was coming up on 20 years, so just prior to this, right around here, we go up to board for captain at like a 19 point something year point. 20 years is a good retirement point. 20 years is a magic number in the Navy, right? Because then you can collect a pension. At least I still can. They don't have as much of that system anymore. But so I hadn't put in retirement papers, and so it could have been some scenario where I could have been selected for captain, and then you owe them 2 tours after that. The next 8 years of your life is dictated because here's 4 years as a program manager here, 4 years as a CO there, whatever it may be. And I didn't get selected, which was a breath of relief after all of this, to be able to sit back and look at, do I want to do that for the next 8 years? And the short version is, the answer became no. I loved the Navy, I still do, but the side of my life would go in other directions, both for family reasons and others. So decided to retire, and I don't know, within a week, I think less than a week, I was on the phone with Professor Singer, right? I met him just after here, right? So there was at least like a decade where we had known each other and interacted and been at conferences and this, that, and the other. And my name was known enough with others like Howard Fireman, if anyone recognizes the name Howard Fireman, and Ed Comstock and others. I was sort of like a known entity. So when there was an opportunity here and they discovered there was this opportunity that this kid named John wasn't gonna be in the Navy anymore. Things lined up. So that's the short and sweet. Along the way, had two kids, Zach is child number 1, Nadia is child number 2. Yeah, what else on this? I don't know. In essence, though, lots of experience along the spectrum from requirements to design to acquisition to construction to repair to everything. I didn't ever get to decommission a ship or turn it into razor blades. That's about the only thing I haven't done related to the life cycle of a ship. Yeah, so instead of coming here to Michigan, didn't get that opportunity, turned it into something else, demonstrated some resilience along the way, and found my way here. So just to get rid of some of the acronyms and alphabet soup and understand the Navy a bit better, figured I'd talk about the Navy. Unless there's questions, I can pause too. Maybe that's.
When you go through this, can you mention if you were like the king of the Navy for the day, so anything you said would go? A couple things that you would.
Maybe, as long as everyone understands the term non-attribution. Right, so that was always something we had when we had like guest speakers up at MIT or elsewhere. We'd have some admiral come in. There was always this policy of non-attribution, right? So I'll say whatever. I will speak my mind, but it's not me. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't say that, right? Like it doesn't. We understand you heard it, but it doesn't leave this room kind of thing. King for a day, yeah. There's part of it too. Is if you, I will find myself laughing at someone who can summarize things to a king for a day type of soundbite, right? As if there is only one problem in the Navy that would only be solved if we just did this one thing, like, yeah, right. So it would be pretty complex for me. There's a few things, but that's a little bit of what Professor Singer and I are working on right now too, are some proposals that'll move the needle in the right direction. But so everybody knows, President has his cabinet, Secretary of Defense is one of those cabinet members, and then within the Secretary of Defense, all sorts of organizations, but Department of the Navy is one of them. A few unique things about the Department of the Navy is it's not just the Navy, it's the Marine Corps also, right? It's the Navy, so all of their budget exhibits come from the Commandant, also through the Chief of Naval Operations, so we call them our sister service. There has been legislation proposed in the past to actually rename it to the Department of the Navy and Marine Corps. What was I reading? Generally, it was Senator McCain that would kind of get in the way of that, right? The Navy veteran himself was like, nah, we're the Department of the Navy. But it may come up again and it may be appropriate. But at any rate, one of the unique things about the Navy is that it's Navy and Marine Corps as far as a lot of this stuff is concerned. What next? So then within, so we see Chief of Naval Operations coming out of the Marine Corps, but even below the Secretary of Defense gets to the Secretary of the Navy. This is good enough. It's from like 2007. It was amazing to me how difficult it was to find like distribution A sources just of org charts of the Navy online. So we call it the Secretariat, right? The people that work in the office of the Secretary of the Navy. There's not many of them when it comes down to it, right? There might be a couple more offices than what are represented here in 2007, but you have an assistant secretary for research, development, and acquisition. That one's important to us because that one in particular owns sort of like education and ship design and things like that. But manpower, reserve affairs, financial management, installation environment, there are others, but we call it the Secretariat. They work for the Secretary of the Navy. And this is the level where they are the word politically appointed, right? So anyone that goes in any of these boxes, these assistant secretaries and they have to be approved by Congress, whereas there will be what are called SESs, senior executive service, like very senior civilians, but they just get to sort of like promote into that position. So right now, ASNRDA, a gentleman named Nick Girton finally got approved in December by Congress. They stopped that particular roadblock, but for almost a year, it was a guy named Jay Stephanie. Mr. Jay Stephanie, who was a senior civilian in SES that was performing the duties of, he was acting in that position, but not approved by Congress. So there were limitations to his power in terms of what he could do because he had not been approved by Congress. Everyone sort of below these boxes, sort of senior civilians that have worked their way up the ranks. And in fact, Mr. Stephanie started in the equivalent of what is now NAVC 05D1, which I promise, is that the next slide even maybe? 2 slides from now. But he started in concept design. He was a ship concept designer at the basic level, right? The stuff y'all do in 470 and 475, like he was in that Navy outfit doing that, and he worked his way up over the last 30 years to be the equivalent of political appointee. Another gentleman named John Hootman doesn't fall out on this org chart because he's on CNO staff, but another senior civilian, went to Webb Institute, went to MIT, started in ship concept design, and now he is the deputy for integration of warfare, right? So there's submarine, surface, carrier, combat systems, everything, and then integration above them. He's the deputy that owns the whole portfolio, and he's a Webb graduate and an MIT, right? He's a NavArc by trade, right? So all of that to say, if that attracts you, like there are paths up to be senior civilians where you're in charge of money and portfolios and things of that nature. Lots of opportunity to do cool things in the Navy. Then all the way over here on the right is just sort of a 101 picture that had some cool numbers to it worth talking about, right? This is all 270, like any 270 motherhood and apple pie, right? That there's $5.4 trillion worth of commerce, that a good portion of that goes by sea, right? But I don't need to convince all of you of the importance of what it is that we do. But the interesting point here, more so in the middle box that we can talk about, there's about 500, almost 500,000 active duty members, about half of that in terms of civilians, so around 220,000 civilians serving the United States Navy across a bunch of occupations. I don't know what they mean by artisans, don't hold me to all of this, it was cool information. And then about a quarter, a little less than a quarter of the DoD budget is for the Navy and Marine Corps. So again, remember, that's a number that's both Navy and Marine Corps. $255 billion is what we're trying to spend in FY24 if the Appropriations Act ever gets passed instead of these continuing resolutions. But let's pull up out of that rabbit hole too. But then of the $255 billion, shipbuilding and conversion Navy. So these are the destroyers and the carriers and the subs and the landing craft and like everything that we consider a ship. About $32 billion a year is what we'll spend in shipbuilding in FY24. Lion's share of that, someone's gotta know, have a really good guess. Not DDGX. Columbia, the Columbia class submarine, right? The replacement for the Ohio class, which is the Secretary of Defense's #1 priority, right? Because when it comes to defense, and especially nuclear deterrence, we have this thing called a triad. So we have the bombers that you can send and come back. We have ICBMs that are like, that's in the air now. But then we have the Ohio class, soon to be the Columbia class, where you don't know where it is and it's resilient. Like if we take out the rest of Earth, it's still underneath the water and we can still respond that way, right? So it's an important part of what we call the nuclear triad. So it's the SecDef's #1 priority. So yeah, most of the money is going into that. I'm already getting the yellow light. I just keep talking. There's where do I want to get to with organization? Well, so importantly, so NAVC is a huge org. So under CNO, there are, let me go over 3 basic categories. Under the Chief of Naval Operations down there at the bottom, 3 basic categories. One, now I have to scroll, but I took out the mouse. Where'd the cursor go? There we go. 3 shore commands, system commands, type commands. So all of that to say, so there are 5 what we call system commands. Naval Air Systems Command, Naval Supply Systems Command, Naval War Systems Command, Naval Facilities Systems Command, but more importantly, for folks like us, the Naval Sea Systems Command. And so what's sort of interesting and important there, about 225 civilians in the Navy, like a third of them work in NAVSEA, which makes some sense because we're the Navy, right? So you would think that a lot of the civilians would be working on the acquisition, sustainment, design, construction, everything related to ships, right? Because we're the Navy. But yeah, 86,000 out of the 220,000 work for NAVSEA, right? So big opportunities. So next, like pop quiz question, where do we think most of those are? There's a good lion's share of them somewhere. I'm gonna jump to shipyards. That's what you were about to guess. Most of them, we have 4 public shipyards, Puget, Pearl, Norfolk, and subs up in the Northeast. So most of them are in the shipyards, but tons of programs, but all it is, so I mentioned 1-star Admiral James Downing just put on his 3rd star, finally approved. He is now running Naval Sea Systems Command. We're trying to work on getting him out here sometime this term because he wants to. But of note, under Naval Sea Systems Command, NAVSEA 05, Naval Systems Engineering and Logistics, Rear Admiral Lloyd, right? And Commander Naval Surface Warfare Center. So when you hear about Philadelphia, Card Rock, things like that, they work for the